let me see.
I'm just starting up the stream. It's gonna take a minute.
Okay. You see something?
Yes.
Yep.
And there?
I'm just starting up the stream. It's gonna take a minute. So it's live. Okay. I would ask everyone, so before we begin, maybe Thomas can give a little bit of an introduction, and I would just ask everyone to mute their mics while we have presenters speaking. So whenever you're ready.
I'm just inviting people now on Facebook. Yeah. Okay. Is this the first slide?
Yeah. What do you see? A black screen with autopoietic system and two quotes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, that's the first one.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, we are now like around 10 people, 12 people. The people probably will start joining. We'll keep joining in the next minutes. So welcome to the third COT and music seminar. As a quick introduction, this seminar cycle started out from like a collective interest from people in different universities that work either on art or in chemical reaction networks, which sound something really different from each other, two things different from each other. But we have done some work and some discussions finding the common points between like the fundamental, let's say, topics or fundamental elements of what constitutes biological systems and what constitutes artistic creations. So one of the core concepts around this, let's say, connection between art and science is the notion of autopoiesis. It's actually a crucial one, fundamental one. So today our speaker, Felix Lazo, is trained in biology initially, and he later moved, even had, like, you were a student of Maturana himself. So Felix Lazo is Chilean biologist and artist, and he well studied biology, and then he studied like higher performance in music. Then he went to work with a Fulbright scholarship to Europe, then started doing some art computer installations and explorations. So he is a truly expert in art science, I will say, someone who has had a foot on each side for quite a long time. So very happy to have you here, and we leave you to start your talk. So thank you, Felix. Please start.
Perfect. Well, my name is Felix Lazo. I am a visual artist first. I sometimes consider myself as a painter, actually, but I was brought up as a scientist and also as a musician. I started playing the block flute since I was very, very young. And then I went into my biological studies. And then I realized I want to finish my music studies. And then when I was doing my music studies, I realized that I wanted to paint. So everything got really mixed and passionate when I was 20 or something. But in the long run, everything has gone together. I have tried to focus on only one field, but I have these three foods that are all the time like mixing in my brain, like visual things, sound things, and musical things, and also a strong root in science somehow. So this work I'm going to show today is a series of work based on the autopoietic systems. I had the chance to study with Humberto Maturana when I was in my first grade in biology at the Universidad de Chile. It was a very tough class, very weird class. For me, coming from school directly, it was shocking. We were for 1 year studying one little book called Of Machines and Living Creatures. And so we were like 2 pages a week, like reading and reading. And at that time, I didn't get it at all. I could not understand properly what was going on. It was too much for me at that time. But afterwards, when I went into art, painting, and then have an encounter with computers, and then after that, like I don't know, 15 years later, something started like getting back into my brain, so I could have a glance of what was this autopoietic systems or autopoietic theory about. Okay, so I start this lecture with two quotes that are very important for me. For me, more important than Humberto Maturana is his colleague Francisco Varela. I have read a lot of books of Francisco Varela, and somehow I have like a deep admiration for him because the way I see it, maybe I'm completely wrong, is I have my own bias. Maturana went to the social scheme of his theory, but Varela went into a more complex thing, and he went into Buddhism. And for me, that was very, very interesting. So I read a book of Varela who was very challenging and changing for me. It was called of Present Body, and he explains here a little. I'm going to read these quotes. We are interested in knowing is precisely the meaning of being or be in the world. That's very Heidegger too. That's Merleau-Ponty. Phenomenon, Merleau-Ponty is from phenomenology. And then we have Francisco Varela. This is very important for me, at least for my work, is the world was, we know, it's not pre-given, but it is enacted through our history of structural coupling. And he will go deeper into that in saying that actually we as mammals have evolved with the ecosystem of this planet in a dialogue between the the flowers, the trees, the water, and ourselves. So we are not separated. We are we are in this process of enacting, as I explained. And that's all about my work. My work is about the process of enacting, of how to keep moving with the work so it can be created. And also the concept of that everything is flowing, nothing is fixed. So everything, the time frames are very important in my thinking, because since everything is flowing, everything is moving, it depends a lot of how big the frame you have or how small the decisions you can make. Okay, so next slide. Here is the definition of autopoietic systems, and also it's a quote of these monks. I love this etching, and this somehow relates to the problem of knowledge. How do we really know? This etching is about these 5 monks who go to that were blind, and they go to study an elephant, but each of them reach the elephant in a different part. One the trunk, the other with the ear, the other the tail. So when they come back and explain what an elephant is, they have different views, and that's the way how somehow I see science, and also and the whole concept of knowledge is that we really have a very biased and a very small part of the reality, so that we can grasp. So autopoiesis is it's a self-organization concept that comes from Maturana and Varela in 1973, and it relates somehow to a process of a cell, how it organizes itself. Yeah, cells are autopoietic when they include a network of processes and operations. Yeah, and somehow they can incorporate things and move around, but they keep the structure, and that's a very important thing. Okay, so the this body of work started when I was after my studies of systemics in Paris. I went to study at the school of Yanis Xenakis for a year, and there we study a lot of problems of structure and how to create systems. There's one of my professors was Agustino Discipio. He was he was creating at that time these ecological morphological systems, and so that concept of something that would be evolving and creating itself was there at that time already. And this work provides an organic solution to a series of questionings that mark my visual trajectory as an artist and musician. And after realizing a lot of work in multimedia, I was looking for the synchronicity between the video and the audio. And then after at that time, I started designing programs that could relate directly the visual and the audio streams. Um, One of the conclusions I have is that they are different, completely different channels of our brain, at least my brain, in the sense that you hear things in a different, in a non-linear way with visuals. Light is straight, it has a completely different universe. So I'm going to show you one of the first pieces I did with this system. It's called Method Entropia, that somehow created the whole series. This is when I was programming this piece, suddenly it started like moving around by itself, and so it surprised me a lot. I said, okay, this is like a living being. This is like an autopoietic system. So here I'm gonna quit here. I'm gonna try to do the video. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it. Let me see the video where it is. Do you have any questions? No?
Not here.
Okay, I found it. Oops. No, I don't have the video. Here. Can you see it? Can you see the video?
Yeah, it's starting.
Okay. Can you hear it?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay, let's continue. So that's not really a video. It's taken from a performance because this work is just a program that somehow receives the visual the no not the visual the audio input and translate it into sine waves, and then has a loop inside that's trying all the time to correct the pitch, but it's not really a pitch, so it will go on like looking for a sound by itself, so that makes it move all the time. So here it's in this slide is the description. The sounds are captured by the microphone, and it's programmed in two program environments. One is Super Collider in sound and Pixel Shocks for video. Here is the video part, the programming. You can see like very roughly how it somehow feeds itself back. All the time it's feeding itself back with different parameters. Also, the ones who know a little bit of Super Collider, you will see here that it has in the first part here, it has a control. I call it control amplitude. That is constantly controlling the input to avoid feedback, and at the same time it has a pitch follow. It will try to regulate the pitch, and but it will not never achieve it because it's constantly changing. And also a granulated system. So somehow this is how it's behaving. It's apparently very simple, but you could see the results of the processes are very interesting. I perform a lot with this piece. I did a couple of concerts with it, and okay, let's continue. Um, the emergent form. This is another concept that's very important to Francisco Varela and also for me. It's and also we talk about a lot about that in the Sanakis school. It's the concept of creating a piece of art that somehow behaves more like nature in the sense that it will sprout from inside. So I had an epiphany drawing this skull. I don't know if you can see the skull. The skull is drawn from behind, from the from underneath. So here's where is the the column is. And here are the eyes, and here is the jaw, the upper part of the teeth. Okay, so I was drawing this 99 at my studio, and then suddenly I realized that the whole skull was created by a process of sedimentation. I would say that it would flow through. It would just flow. The form will flow from itself. It's like a growing plant, like a seed or something. But for me, it was very important to like visually understand it. They said the form was evolving from itself. It was very different from the things that we humans usually have. We create things like from the outside. We construct things with pieces. So this skull was not constructed. It was it was evolved. It was created. It was grown. It has grown by itself. So one of my this was very shocking for me for a couple of days. So how to create a piece of art that will evolve, that will create it by itself. So that's one of the reasons for me that when I met computers, it was so important because I could somehow start working in this process. So here, for example, this is a quote of Varela. One of the most important scientific discovery of the 20th century is the locally interactive components. Okay, so what he says is that certain small rules can create a very complex things. I'm not going to explain it because everybody knows about that. This is a very interesting quote of Varela. Well, and this piece here is a visual piece. It was made in 2009, but the whole thing is that I don't remember how I did it. So I found it in my computer after two days. I was working a lot at night at that time, so I would start like trying different parameters because all these complex systems are very very fragile. So one little comma can make the whole difference, and one little byte or number can change completely. You can move out of the screen or whatever. So I rescued this piece because I found it and I found it very interesting. Um, I don't have the code because it was a byprocess of something I was looking for, and this one got appeared there. Here is another one, uh, more or less close to the same process. This is done mainly by reducing so fixing completely the screen with no refreshing process, and at the same time moving the size of an image. And this is done algorithmically, not with the mouse. It's just done by itself. Okay. So then I applied to some funds here in Chile. They're called Fondart. It's funds for the arts, with a project that it was very challenging and very interesting for me because it was 6 studies of Santiago based on the concept of cage, the 4 minutes and 33 seconds. So I will create design some algorithms and programs, and then go to a specific place in Santiago, and for this kind of minutes, stay there and let the system work by itself. So somehow this is the first work I'm working with, like letting the system like behave by itself. So it took me a year to experiment with this project, and it was very very interesting. But at the same time, um, a lot of chaos and very difficult to make sense of it. Then I went to performance 208 to and 211. I work mainly in interactive performance work, presenting several versions of the autopoietic systems, and most of them work directly with my own inputs or with the input of the audience. At this time, I was all the time working with visuals and phonetic um, poetry. So here is a photograph of me performing at the Centro Cultural de Spain in Santiago, with a big projections, as you could see, and the same concept of this, like smoothing off the screens and in direct relationship to the sound. And I was here performing this score. And here's the score. It's a very open score. As you can see, it's uh, it's just a basic, very basic instructions to how to to for a phonetic music. So this goes at the same time with effects and with echoes and the things that start feeding. So it gets very complex. So here then
Sorry,
hello.
excuse me, Felix.
Yes,
Hello, sorry. Excuse me that I interrupt. Can you go to the previous slide, please?
this
Uh,
one.
is this a system of rules?
Yes, it's a score. It's like a
Or
musical. It's a music score. So where you
okay,
can
it's a score.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
directly a score. It's for humans.
Yeah. No, it's not that it has to be read from left to right. It's not like a system of rules that can be reapplied. It's not generative.
No, 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 not at all. This is just
Okay,
it's
okay, okay.
it's the score, and the system start is feeding itself, and but this is a fixed score.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, thank you.
It has a start and an end. So then I was invited to a different. I started moving around. So I went to Madrid and to Sao Paulo, Brazil, to Argentina. I went to Canada, and I was working with these systems and start like playing around. So this is this basic scheme of the autopoietic systems at that time. So you have sometimes two microphones usually. I did a piece with five microphones, and I worked for a dance company also, where each dancer had his own microphone, and everything was started like be looping around. You would find that in my webpage. Well, here this system is like two microphones with super collider, feedback filter, pitch follow one, pitch follow two, grain generator, and at the same time the video it's capturing with the camera and processing the videos that are somehow influenced by the what's happening in the sound part. So both parts start dialoguing, but even though they are programmed in different environments. So that for me was very like important to keep it separate. Still I keep them separate. And then I was also moving the system with an 8-channel console. So we had an 8-channel system, and people would be like in the center, and the sound would be like moving around the whole because that's very typical of the electroacoustic school. There's like specialization how to move the sounds. And then I started moving around. I have a couple of bad experiences with the performance. It was very demanding at a certain point, and also when I started working with this company I was telling you about, we had to play for like 3 months at the theater. So it was like every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I had to go there and perform. And for me, it was that was very so demanding. So I started like thinking of can I make an installation that will work by itself and not have me like uh, controlling everything. Let itself move around. So I designed this installation. It was a huge installation at a very big gallery here in Santiago, where it was like I don't know 17 meters by 5, something like that, two walls. And it goes with a microphone on the center. More details you can have in my webpage. And it was this sensitive visuals lines, circles that will be like pulsing, sensitive to the sound. And at the center of the room was this microphone where people can sing, and the system would sing with them, like giving them feedback with the sound and also with the visuals. This piece goes with this like boxes, origami boxes, yellow and purple, somehow to make the walls of the room somehow appear and create a texture. So it's not it, it, it I don't know why I designed it by that, but that was the purpose. The boxes will be like a layer of visual content. This is another piece I made for the museum at Quinta Normal in Santiago, Chile. It was called Stilett, and it was a dark room with these projections that were extremely sensitive to sound, and so when people will go in, the system will start like moving around and very very intensely. The piece ended with a performance, and that's what it's called. At one time, I was obsessed with an area of the magic flute of Mozart and of monostatos. I was studying that piece, and I really like it. So This one, that's why it's called Stilett. It's the first words of this area. Um, so this is here's the performance score. You can see here is the Mozart score, and here is the what I was doing with the system. I was manipulating the system at the same time I was singing, so I could change the volumes, I could change the frequencies, I could change a lot of things just with my gestures. I connected a wireless mouse, and I will be like moving the mouse around my body to control it. This piece, it was at the Ghetto Institute in Santiago, and this is a translation of visual phenomena, sound phenomena into visual. So this was at the entrance. There were two big screens and some a microphone. So when people go in, the system will grab their attention and start like moving these shapes, and depending on the intensity and the quality of the sound, it will change completely. And this is after that I moved to the south where I'm living now, and then I got another scholarship or grant, and I did this. This is definitely a work where I was consciously looking for an autonomous system, and this is these 10 experiments with open frameworks and trying to create a system that will somehow behave by itself. I could only make these glimpses of, so they're like little scenes. The interesting part of this work was that it was exhibited in a big gallery, a big each one was with its own big screen. And the interesting part was when the lady at the gallery told me that a man came over and found it very boring because nothing was moving, nothing was happening at all. And when he was leaving, a little girl come in and start like shouting and running inside the gallery, and the whole system, the whole installation, the whole, it starts moving with the girl, like following her and answering her sounds and movements. And so that and this so this gentleman had to go back again and realize that he had to take charge of the process. So that for me, the evolution, the the willing capacity of addressing a system to answer you was for me very important. To accept that for the work to behave or to give you some information, you have to interact with the work. You needed an interaction with the work, a conscious, voluntary interaction. This is another piece for the museum in 2015. It's a three-screen projection. It's three computers, and here I'm working with Raspberry Pi and with night cameras. And what it's doing, this is capturing the presence of the people. This is not here. The process is reversed somehow. The sound is important, but the localization of the people, the movement of people, it's captured by the computer, and somehow you could somehow create in certain instances a resemblance of a theremin, in the sense that if you could walk slowly, the system will be like changing the pitch following you somehow. It was not directly an idea, but there was a byproduct of the whole process. And here is one of the pieces I really like. It was very interesting. This was an attempt to create a whole neural system. Um, I did two presentations, one a cultural center in Puerto Varas, it is a closed city, and in Frutillar, a center, a cultural center I was running at that time. Here, what I'm doing is projecting on sand from the ceiling to the floor, on a big bed of salt, very very thick salt. And what happens with the projection is that the way the crystal salts behave with the light gives them a very shiny feature. And also, I'm working with five systems of five microphones and five microcomputers that are attached to speakers. So the whole system will start communicate, and the system doesn't is not wired together. Everything is communicated through the sound. And so the sound is affecting the image, and also in the image is dependent on what the camera of each computer is seeing. So, for example, in this first slide, you can see that the people are watching how they are taken into the camera and redrawn by the system. This one is a piece I did in 2018 in Santiago. Here I designed a system for painting in which I dance in front of the camera, and the camera starts grabbing the spaces with computer vision, but I set it up in a certain way that it will not grab me, but it will grab the spaces behind me or around me. So it's a way of creating some complexity in your movements because they are not linear. You move in a certain way, but the system and understand it in a different way. So I was for weeks like playing with this system, moving around the camera, and somehow it will start like painting all this. I did a whole series. You can see them in my webpage. And then I was invited to this exhibition, and I did a projection with the system working. It didn't work that much because the Raspberry Pi was not powerful enough, and also the projector was very weak, so it was not like challenging and interesting as the paintings. And also the sound system worked fine. It was answering to the sounds of the people around the room, but it will mimic somehow a mandolin. So it was mapped to a mandolin, not physical but digital. So it was very interesting because it was also mapped through a 22-step scale. So it was very like minimal kind of multi micro interval music. Okay, and this is another project for 2019. This is three applications for cell phones, Android. You can find it in the web page. Um, it was the idea was to create an experience of the way I was working. So I had these tools, and I shared them, and so how you could interact with them and play with them, and to see if the results could have some meaning. Um, Here, the point of who decides which piece or which instance of the process is relevant has to do with the eye of the artist, and also the take yourself like this is accept that this is what I think is relevant and I want to keep it, and this is interesting but it's not relevant. That's a very strong decision we artists take all the time, because something could be like very interesting, other times not. I don't know if there's no rule for that. And the conclusion, it's I can I can show you a little video to finish. Let me see where's my browser. Here. Here is a video of the installation at Can you see it? Can you see it?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can see and hear.
Okay, perfect. So this is the sun projection, on salt, and the camera is capturing in black and white what is going on in the space, and at the same time, it's moving around. The I took this. The video is taken when there's no people inside, but when people were inside, all the systems start like moving around much faster and much complex. It's very long, so you can see it in my web page. And the last thing here is this is the 10 autopoietic systems, autonomous. Here's an example of, for example, one is where the sound, the visuals are drawn by the sound. And another one, completely different. So this is responding to the sounds of the space. Okay, I'm open to questions.
First, first of all, thank you, Felix, for your presentation. I think it's really, really cool, really exciting to see the not only like each piece, but also the evolution of of your of your installations, like the concepts you have followed and the growing inspiration to do more things. So I like it personally very much, and I would like to comment before we start the round of the questions round that I met Felix because of his work. I was thinking there must be an artist who works on autopoietic systems in Chile. There can't be zero guys doing that. I was like looking for someone because I work on this in a more scientific way, and then I did some Google searches, and immediately Felix popped up, and I just contact you. I think by email something. Then we plan a personal meeting, and that was it. So
Yes, true.
it was a very inactive way to meet as well. Like nobody put us in touch. We exchange and like, so it's really really fantastic what you have shown. I wonder if people have questions. I have some, but I prefer to leave others to start. So anybody question comments?
I really like your presentation. I enjoyed your work, Felix. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm also impressed how consistent you are and persistent. However, I have it's a random question, but I was just wondering for where you say that the sound is generating images, of course, you're making some decisions on at least in which space this is going to happen or in which frequency. You do give parameters yourself. You didn't go into that, but I'm curious about your authorship. And specifically, I was wondering in this installation where you were showing the projection on salts, which I think it's also wonderful. How is also in this mobile application, where do the forms in your visuals come from? Because if we're talking about these linear mappings of the sound, that's kind of like straightforward. But when you are creating shapes, I don't see where they come from.
Oh, it depends. And if, for example, in the neural installations, the shape it's a sphere that is mapped with the camera, and it's also moving around. It's and also the sphere is bouncing from the sides of the screen and changing size all at the same time. And at the same time, it's I forgot how it's called. It's not refreshing stuff, so it's leaving a trail of where it's moving. So in this process of leaving a trail, it's drawing. It's drawing with what is with the past.
I
For
see.
example, if it captures something, it will start drawing. So that's somehow it's very like chaotic in a sense. It's not very like controlled how the image will be moving, the shapes. And with the paintings, the shapes come with the presence of your body. The way, for example, if I put my hands like this, the software will create two bubbles, and these bubbles will be like solid color. So if I move my head, they will start like moving around, and at the same time they will start leaving a trace. So sometimes it will take like, I don't know, hours to make it something that it's interesting. That's the tiring part, because what you see is the results, but there's a lot of frustrating processes in the middle. How to get to something that is significant. I don't know if I answered your question properly. And also, for example, in the web page there is the 10 systems, autonomous system, they are, the code is there. So if you read code, you can understand what's going on there, because everything is it's very clear.
Right. For people who don't see the chat there, the website is lazo.pl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make a comment on YouTube. So for anybody there, lazo.cl. So any other question? More questions, comments?
Yes. I also found it very interesting. What I'm a little bit wondering about is where precisely is the autopoiesis in there. I definitely see some kind of feedback system, adaptive cybernetic systems. I see some self-organization in there, but the autopoiesis is kind of more specific. It's a self-maintaining system. So the system that produces itself, and once it's producing itself, it's reproducing itself. While these systems seem to be much more adapted to the external input rather than producing themselves. Or is that the wrong impression?
I think you're right. I think there's not straight autopoietic systems, especially because they cannot reproduce themselves, and also because they are in a dialogue. And for me, the temporal part is very important, because it could be in a certain moment creating, because the autopoietic system for me is not the machine, is the result of the process. It's what's happening. It's a very like esoteric or abstract thing, you know. It's like the machine is creating different parameters, and sometimes with the feedback of the system and the external situations, create something that can become a work that is meaningful as an art piece. So for me, but for me, more than trying to create a work that will be like autopoietic by the book, for me the important thing is to create a tool that can make me discover visual and sound things that can be significant as poetry.
I would say your artwork is autopoietic, but not the system that
Somehow, yes.
your work.
Well, I'm particularly interested in the idea of having a system that generates meaning. And the meaning for me is in the relationships. If you have something that doesn't just exist on its own, but that connects to other things so that other things react to it and form some kind of an organization of order, that's when it becomes meaningful. And it's true that in these kind of pieces, yeah, it's difficult to see the meaning because you don't start from a well-known meaning. It's a difference between, say, abstract art and figurative art, or between avant-garde art and traditional art. In the traditional art, there are certain standard patterns that we all recognize and we know what they mean. We know that that is a woman and that is a flower and that is a nude. While here the meaning must emerge to some degree from the mind of the spectator. But the meaning is there because there is some kind of a dynamic structure in the things. And then it's interesting to see what kind of dynamic structures will more evoke meaning than others. I mean, you could have a very stupid and simple dynamic structure, one that's always repeat the same three notes. That's not very meaningful. But you could have something like this that's much more interactive. On the other hand, if you make something that's too chaotic, then also it will not be meaningful anymore.
Sure. Definitely. And also it's very important that the the important here is the experience of because we're looking at references. It's different, for example, if we could go into the installation and then come out and start talking about meaning, because the meaning here has a different levels: the conscious level, emotional levels, subconscious levels, biological levels. For example, in this installation of the neuronal, a friend of mine couldn't go in because she was afraid of the sounds. Her body was reacting to the sounds in a very strange way. So her belly started like moving, and she said, I cannot go in because my body is reacting in a way I cannot recognize. So, for example, that's something that is interesting.
Well, with Katarina, we've done some work on trying to formulate foundations for art science. And one thing we conclude is that what art and science both have in common is that they are looking for meaning, they are looking for patterns. But the patterns in art typically are much more variable, subjective, context dependent, less structured, while science likes to have patterns that are well defined, clear, regular. But actually, all these patterns are meaningful, but yeah, the one are more fluid and the other ones are more rigid. And I think that the art science is really when you go from the one end to the other, from the fluid to the rigid, from the well defined to the ambiguous. And I think your work is a nice example of that.
Thank you.
Well, I have a question, like following your trace of developments. I wonder if it is in your plans to go a little bit on what Francis was saying, um, on making this what now it's an installation, what now constitutes an installation. It's a representation of an adaptive process of like a fundamental, let's say, biological or biological-like process, something like like the building blocks of what constitutes autopoietic systems, right? So you are now, let's say, that achieved the capacity to make installations that produce something like what is that thing, like to something like that. So then wouldn't be in your plans to put many of those entities together, like to make their own self-installation? You see what I mean? Like like as a further step. I wonder if you could think of emergent systems out of interacting. So I was thinking also on something about meaning, which is connecting to this. Um, that there are some simulations that try to define meaning exchange as agreement. So you have two systems that they can exchange, for example, symbols, but they don't exchange only the symbols, but they exchange also their encode form of how will they explain that meaning. So I tell you, this is my message and this is what it means to me. And then you receive the message, process it and send the message back and so on. And until you reach a certain state of agreement for both. So then I was wondering if there might be a way to leave the meaning to emerge on its own, like make some sort of representation of what meaning emergence is. You see what I mean? Make artistic representation of what meaning emergence is. So the person who goes to the installation, the visitor, I don't know the word, sees this process happening and can kind of understand that this is going on. You see, I'm not sure if I can explain. It's not my language, definitely. But to represent the emergence of poetic experience in this
The whole
interacting
thing is,
entity.
it's a the way I'm trying to explain is that yes and no at the same time, because
Mhm.
the way I see art status today has to do with neuro linguistics and neuroscience. What art today is trying to do is to change your include in your neural pattern a chip. So if you ask me what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to create a frequency, mental frequency, visual frequency, that would somehow affect, enhance, modify the brain of the society. So it's a very like ambitious project in itself, because what you're trying to do is, because for me art is that. I remember the first time I listened to music, for example, minimal music, I was shocked because the patterns were completely alien to me. The piece of Steve Reich, 18 Musicians, for example, for me was completely changing. I changed my brain after listening to that piece. I could never listen again the same way as before. The same happened to me with the School of Xenakis. The music I was listening before going to the school, I could hear it, but I could not enjoy it anymore. I have changed completely my brain structure. The same happened with visual things. So for me, art is like a brain accelerator. It's like mathematics, for example, when uh, you learn integrals and things like that. Then you see mathematics in a different way as before. You don't see it anymore as when you were in school. So that art is for me it's like that, and it is in a. So yes, it has to do with what you're saying, but not in the sense of describing a system, but affecting the system or the spectator who is watching it.
Well, yeah, that's what it was kind of maybe theatrical what I was having in mind. Something that the spectator, now I get the word, the spectator can experience the emergence of meaning. You see, so they maybe can get go back home and say, oh, I saw that this is happening. This is a phenomenon, you know, and it happens to me, and it's so you put this new concept. So I was thinking that your installations might be very close to be able to represent that. You see what I mean? That
Yeah,
was my
but
feeling.
no,
Potential
no, I
next,
understand.
like,
Yes, but the whole thing is not to represent it, is to
yeah,
enhance,
I know it's not, yeah, yeah, I know, yeah.
to make the people live that.
Yeah, but by representation, I mean not symbolic. I mean experiential. So
Perfect.
so so it's very it's very funny to think of experience representation in a non-symbolic way. So I think what's this? Yeah, I forgot the name, but a famous philosopher was thinking that music is something different, like very popular thinker, like I don't remember. So yeah, we scientists, I think a big difference between artists and scientists, like a kind of epistemic or maybe practical, is that we tend to think in symbolic representations. That's what, like, we are fine there. That's our comfort zone. As long as we can represent it symbolically, we are fine. We are in our comfy, couch. But leaving that part and going to non-symbolic representation, it's something human. It's very human. It's not for machines. Maybe something even at the edge of the difference between machines and human beings for now. uh, and yeah, so the art in that edge is, for me, it's kind of art scientific, if at least from following what you do or what you say. So really, it's kind of moving like brain
No,
smashing.
and for example, with this the last pieces I was doing of the paintings, I print them on canvas, so they look like paintings, real paintings. And the whole
Mm,
thing is that the the threshold of the colors is so smooth that you have to go very close to see it. And then when you are in the process of seeing it, since it's very smooth, your brain starts like slowing down because it needs a lot of
mm,
concentration to be able to understand the process of the color mixtures. And that's something very interesting. And that's what you're talking about, because then you start like tuning up with the piece. And I think like every art piece do that actually, tunes up the spectator in a certain frequency, so he can go in syntony or in sympathetic resonance with it.
I think also Thomas and Felix, and I was talking about this in an email once, but if you, for example, see how white noise comes into existence, it's a kind of an example of an emergent property. So you could do this easily with like a modular synth. You could create some random fluctuations in sounds, and you can choose different frequencies, and if you get to a certain stage, a certain tempo, a certain speed of changing those random fluctuations, you will suddenly feel emerging the white noise aspect. But you could say something similar about perception of pitch. It's the same thing. Or even if written, how we are perceiving written, it's also an emergent property which you are perceiving. And I think all those things are typical examples in music, in perception of sound, and could be really interesting just to try to maybe analyze or to try to research where certain patterns can make us, how would I say, create something of an emergence that becomes symbolic. It's I don't know if you are hearing me, but
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
The sound here is not so great, but
well, there's this experiment of John Cage where he puts this rhythmic pattern and start accelerating it, and then it started like moving on the pitch. So he made a whole thesis about that, saying that that the difference is perception, is how we humans hear it. It's nothing to do with the object itself. We can hear it as a pattern, but if we change the speed, we can hear it as a sound, as a continuous sound. And that's very interesting. The edges of what we can or we cannot apprehend of reality.
Yeah, and somehow this is the essence of emergence, and maybe the way we are perceiving things in a symbolic way could be just an example of emergence. Somehow, I don't know if
actually
you catch.
one of the mainstream definitions of emergence it's a very symbolic one, but one of the mainstream definitions in the philosophy literature, let's say, called complex systems philosophy, is that you need two languages. So you have a language in which you describe the system, and you need another language in which you describe the emergent properties. So if something cannot be described in the language that you need to define the system, so I can define, for example, chess, the game of chess. I need certain abilities, certain logical capacities to define the rules of the game chess, and I can explain that, and that means I explain the game. So everybody can play with those rules. But in order to explain the strategy of how like a very top player thinks, the concepts he needs to use to explain how he thinks cannot be reduced to the language in which the rules of the game are defined. So you need to create concepts that basically make some resemblances to thinking infinite structures. That's how it goes in mathematics. So when you describe something like infinite terms, I need one step, two steps, and then you need to reflect on infinite possibilities and make a concept that kind of captures this infinite. That's one mainstream way to logically define emergence.
I think, and it's really close.
And that's the creation of a symbol. Sorry, this is my point, the little point. So then you need to lift a new symbol that doesn't belong to, that has no place in this other language, because it cannot be written. It's infinite, basically. It's infinite symbol. So you need to encode this infinite in a new symbol, which is the strategic thinking in this case, or something
It's
like that.
very, very similar to the Gödel's incomplete
Yeah.
theorem.
Yeah, it's the same. It's in the same literature, basically, the expressiveness of the language. Well, Gödel system, it's about propositional logic, and then you need, it's actually that precise thing. Yeah, it's very connected to that.
That which is incomplete already is like in the condition of being an emergent system.
Yeah, well, but Gödel only cares about truth. So, well, which is almost everything, right? So saying proving that something is true, something that is true according to the axioms of your system. But this is about making up propositions, whether they might be also false in principle. But the fact is that you lift a new concept. So I haven't ever thought about the relations between Gödel's theorem and the definition of emergence. So, like, I cannot really say something like I'm in solid ground, but it's weird. So we are now discussing the emergence of symbolic meaning or symbolic knowledge. Felix, what have you done? Yeah.
It's funny because I'm always trying to go beyond the symbolic representation of things.
Mhm.
I know it's kind of impossible, because we humans apprehend through making things symbolic, and also we communicate by symbolic meaning. Even music, as you say, create patterns that are very unconscious, and somehow yeah. But I'm always trying to go beyond that. What happens when you go to the limit of
Mm.
symbolism? Can you can
Yeah.
you can you apprehend? Is there a reality without the symbolism? And that's the difference between Maturana and Varela. Maturana
Yeah.
said that everything is language, and Varela said no, there's something that's beyond language. And
Mm.
that again, the way I interpret their thinking. So that's why Varela went into Buddhism, looking for states of mind that will be like really, really, really in the edge of the non-symbolic.
Yeah. And also this idea it resonates to what you say with this idea of doing science kind of to your insight. So meditation and knowing yourself in a way that won't go in any paper, but it's part of the knowledge. So you cannot like neglect that. And
And also
yeah, that's
also, but that's like the main musician school.
mm,
You have to train yourself not only in playing the instrument,
yeah.
but you have to train yourself how you're gonna play it, and also in art. If you need if
Mm,
you're going to make a piece of art that somehow enhancing or whatever, you have to be in that mood. You have to be in that state of mind. So there's a lot of what's going on in your mind. You're training your mind of how you. That's not very common in science, but Varela was talking about that.
yeah.
So, for
Mm,
example, if I'm not in the mood of painting, I cannot paint because the colors are not going to come to right. But when you are in the inspiration, everything will start flowing because your other part of your brain, your unconscious brain, worked with you. In the arts, you
mm,
incorporate the unconscious is incorporated in the process. And I don't, in science, I don't see that. It is always it is there. But in art, for example, sometimes you go in a trance and then you finish the work and say, what happened here? Because another part of your brain took charge. We call it the
mm,
left or right hemisphere. It's a very bad map, but somehow that's what happens. It's too complex to be addressed only by one part of your brain. and you have to accept it.
Or to be expressed by only words.
Well, sorry, but I mean, you're touching very much what I've been researching for a very long time. I think that the idea that symbols are basic is kind of old-fashioned already for a while in cognitive science, and that we now have much more advanced models for understanding how the brain makes meaning, and that symbols are really only coming at the very late stage. Most of our cognition is neural, associative, embodied, situated. The symbols come only at a very late stage. And the way I understand symbols nowadays, I mean, the biggest problem in cognitive science has always been there's a so-called sub-symbolic level of neural network, and there is a symbolic level of words and concepts and logic, and how does the one emerge from the other? I think we all agree that the neural level is the most basic one, and the neural level, it doesn't care about symbols, it just works. It's just one thing activating another thing and learning associations. It doesn't care about whether it has a symbolic representation. So the question then is, where do the symbols come from? And my latest understanding is the brain learns patterns, recognizable patterns, when those patterns are kind of sufficiently closed and well distinguished. We call them gestalts. Like the gestalt is something that you recognize, the gestalt of a cat or the gestalt of a restaurant or the gestalt of a number. These are kind of more or less closed networks of associations. And then when you have such a well-packed, compact thing, then you give it a label, and the label is typically a word, and that makes it much easier for the brain to remember these things. Instead of having to remember all the different aspects of a restaurant, you just use this one word restaurant, and you think that everything is covered by this one word. Of course, there is much more to the concept restaurant than just this word restaurant. There are tables, waiters, menus, food, money, buildings, procedures, expectations. The concept restaurant is kind of a labyrinth of interconnected things, but with this one word restaurant, the symbol, we summarize that and we make it easy to speak to somebody else too and to remember it. So the symbols are shortcuts for this whole complex network of associations, and this whole complex network of associations is very fluid, but by turning it into symbols, we lose that fluidity. That's a disadvantage. It makes it easier to communicate, easier to register, easier to remember, but it cuts off the fluidity. So you just need to be aware of that. When you use a symbol, it's a shortcut. It's a label for something very complex and fluid. If you remember that and don't take the label for the reality, for the truth, then you can deal both with symbolic and sub-symbolic cognition.
But the Ouroboros snake is that then you must describe this neural network in a symbolic way.
Well, or not necessarily. You can implement it, you can build one, you can make a work of art. Is that a symbolic representation of the neural network? Not really.
I mean, if you would make a brain, then you would avoid symbolic. Like if
yes, but you can make something that functions like a brain and that is kind of that is not well defined, not rigid, that is self-organizing. Like you have these famous slime molds, these cells that can to some degree behave like an intelligent system, and they organize themselves and they find ways through labyrinths, and they behave a little bit like a brain, but they're not at all like a brain because they're just individual cells that crawl around. So for example, if you would, I could imagine an art science experiment where you would let slime molds crawl to some kind of a complicated labyrinth, and they would find some kind of a network of connections, and they would form an artwork like that. Yeah, is that a symbolic representation? Only if you say so. It's a
Yeah, no,
meaning,
I was just
organizing, emergent thing, yes.
yeah. No, but I was trying to go maybe I advocate of the evil, like if there is this non-symbolic layer, we are kind of very clear that there is this non-symbolic layer. We need to create symbols to communicate. So there is a sort of fluid part where meaning is more, let's say, in a more primitive form, and then meaning gets structured into symbols, and we communicate that. But and then we have art and go into the discussion. We discover this and so on. So the point will be, how could we have a direct channel of meaning transmission at the level of at the non-symbolic level? We will not even be able to talk about it.
Well, we do have all kind of non-verbal,
like being a radical form. I'm thinking of a radical form of meaning transfer
we
through
do have
perception,
all kind of
like
non-symbolic forms of meaning transfer, but they are somewhat less reliable than the symbolic ones. It's a little bit like the difference between digital and analog computing. With digital computing, because you reduce things to independent bits, it's less fluid, it's less likely to dissipate. While with analog computer, things are more fluid, so it's a little bit less reliable. But we do communicate, for example, with our facial expressions, with our movements, with the movements of your hands. It's not a symbolic expression. That movement of my hand does not mean anything particular, but it conveys some meaning. It conveys a meaning, but the meaning that's not fixed. It's not a symbolic meaning.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like rhetorics versus grammar, something like there are no rules for, like, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm following the wrong path today. So
there are a lot of rules, non-verbal, lots of rules. Actually, Maturana and Varela talk about this in a book, the Tree of Knowledge, and they talk about this. That you have to be a human only if you're raised by humans. And this is the experiment of these Indian girls that were raised by wolves, I think, and they changed their old sensory system. They could smell the meat at long distances. They could run in four legs very fast. So they have a human body, but since they were trained, since they were kids by wolves, they have developed these senses that were much more powerful and much more related to wolf life. So it's not only so that's why Maturana said, okay, everything is cultural somehow. So it's you have to be raised by a human mother and a human father to be human first of all, and that's very challenging and that's very interesting because you create your brain somehow.
And what if you watch mother-infant interaction, that kind of communication? You could call that sub-symbolic in a sense.
Right.
It's a kind of intermediate. I mean, there are some researchers that would say that before there was symbolic language, there was some kind of musical language or singing language or mother-infant interaction like kind of language, which we had in a previous in a previous state of our development. But
or telepathy. KGB was developing a whole line of communication with the brain.
Yeah, brain waves.
Right.
I think music is really interesting because it's exactly about that fluidity. It's about continuous information. And I mean, it's when you see, Thomas, when you were talking about integrals and you are talking about the problem of discrete versus continuous in mathematics. But when you see music and sound communication, it remains in the fluid continuous form. And somehow there's still some emergence taking place, which creates to me, it's not a symbol, but it creates some discrete kind of forms which we use in our brain to maybe to structure the information, or maybe to create a next level, or I mean, I think it's really interesting to just that point where you have that switch. It's like in mathematics,
Yeah.
it's an age-old problem, but in music, it's happening all the time. And it's even because Katharina, you were talking about Gödel's theorem, but it makes me think of the paradox of Zeno. If you remember the race between it's one
rabbit.
of Plato's the rabbit, or versus the turtle, if I remember well.
Yeah,
And I mean, it's the same problem. It's the same problem coming again and again, but somehow in music, it's I think it's something really concrete to study there.
Yeah, I mean,
something that fascinates me.
And me too. It's very interesting. I think poetry is maybe like, as that's why I was saying rhetorics. Like poetry is you use words, but you evoke something that is not describable by the words. You know, that I'm not like, it's really hard to talk about things that are untalkable. You know, and that's what I was trying to push, you know, to try to get there. How can we maybe turn around the or to think the unthinkable, you know, think the unthinkable. Can you think the unthinkable? No, you cannot, because it's unthinkable. But you can think of, you know, like it's very funny. Sorry, Katarina.
I'm thinking about, I've thought about this in my work quite a bit, but this conversation now leads me into thinking of in the direction of something that Felix said in the very beginning. And it's also a book that I'm reading at the moment called Meeting the Universe Halfway, that in order for something to happen, you need to go towards it, so that it's both action of somehow eminence of this reality and then you taking part in this reality. And at the same time, Karen Barrett calls it the agent realism. But I'm thinking about it, perhaps a few things. One is that, just to connect to what you were just saying, Thomas, about poetry, poetry is somehow, to me, exactly the good poetry is leaving space for something that is said, leaving it unfinished, allowing for this emergence, for you to come in and to fill it in. And therefore, this meaning that we're talking about, there is no such thing as transferring meaning. You don't transfer meaning, you create meaning for yourself, but that is never the same for somebody else. So what you do is you are in action, actually, and the other kind of subtracts meaning from your meaning. It's not a transfer, it's not information processing. I think this is why we're like jammed thinking like this. It's not from A to B, and it's always changed, and it's interacting. So my meaning will be visible to you in your senses. Therefore, will allow for a different meaning for you. And yeah,
I was meaning that's what I was trying to say, that the poem, it's a sort of piece that you read, you observe. Of course, the author has some intention in it. You will never be able to grasp like a one-to-one map on the intention, or might not have the intention. It's not like, that's not that's not the focus where I was putting the focus. I was putting the focus on the fact that the message that is written as a piece of text, which is a collection of words only, the meaning that people take from that acquire from that, enact by reading, whatever you want to call it, or the meaning that is transferred from those words, which are objects in the reality to you. Maybe the words have their own identity there. Maybe they become like a magical agent, you know, that if you put those words together, they become something that talks to you. The interpretation we want to put about it is not relevant for me. When I was saying what I think, that was not where I put the focus. Where I was putting the focus is on the fact that the words do not mean anymore what we are in our common experience accustomed to understand what the words tend to mean. As like we are accustomed to think that symbols and words have a fixed meaning, have something that, you know, oh, okay, I read a word, okay, I'm gonna get meaning. That's kind of but normal. Words give me some meaning, and I learn, I understand. Well, that's what words are for. But when words, you put them in certain orders, many spectators, many people interact with these words. Not everyone, because some people might not even find any sense, not resonate with it. But certain expressions, certain poems tend to create something that, like, intersubjectively people say, well, this is more than just the words there. This is something that touched me in a different way. And that's the thing that you cannot reduce to symbols. That feeling, you know, I mean, that's what I was trying to communicate. Am I still saying the opposite to what you think?
Finally, my point was that you can never escape the symbolic. So you say this is never to be placed in the symbolic, and I'm also saying that's true, but you can never escape the symbolic. And actually the symbolic is kind of like the highway that allows you. So it's kind of like just...
That's what I was... Yeah. That's what I was thinking, that maybe there might be another way. Like, I'm just like dreaming now, like not being serious, like not, I don't have any, but just flow, like emotion to emotion. Can we connect emotion to emotion directly? You know, the question is just a question. Rituals, drugs, how can we get there?
No, but I want to take what Katarina said about the communication process, and I think that there's two main things there. One is that the art piece is a score, it's an opportunity, it's a symbol, that's a box where the other person has to come with his knowledge of life, with his body, with his neurons, whatever he has constructed all his life, open this box and make meaning of it. The same with the poem. Yeah, you have to make meaning. So it's like teaching. Real teaching doesn't occur with information transfer. It occurs with the opportunity, the environment for the kids or the person to explore and learn by itself. We only can learn if we learn with our own. So for me, we are unique beings, and for me, like communication, symbolic communication, is almost a miracle, because it's like really how much we really understand each other. It's like a conversation of drunk people. When you see a couple of people talking, they talk different things. You don't know why they're communicating at all. And that's the nice thing about art, from my point of view, is that you accept that everybody's going to come with their own baggage, with their own view of the world, and they have to experience that.
But I think we're also talking about meaning as if it exists like inside us, like in our head, or I mean inside our body. So Katerina, you were talking about how, like, you can't communicate, like I can't transfer the meaning from my head to your head. I can express myself, and maybe you'll understand whatever emerges inside you, right? That was kind of your point, which I think is a good point, but I think it's also worth thinking about the idea that that's also not really true. That meaning isn't also inside my head nor in your head, but meaning is between our heads. Like, meaning is between us and the world. So it's like it's always this kind of emergent, inactive process. You can't reduce meaning down to existing in my head.
Yeah, no, I think we are all there. We all kind of, it's just that it's so hard to say in a way that, that's why we, you scientists, tend to make definitions and say, well, this is it, you know. But when you talk about art, this, I always have this feeling like I'm trying to stretch something that is like plastic, and I just don't can get the pieces. Like, it's so funny. Well,
I
sorry.
think it's exactly where, I mean, this is where I find kind of the crack in traditional science, where and also other disciplines can come in exactly in this point, because if you shift from representation to um, experiential, so the agent position in the work, you are actually subverting the basis of traditional science, because science is saying, yeah, it's not it's not agent dependent. It is for each agent always like this. So it's, I mean, I'm not surprised that our conversation went here. Also, Francis is sending some articles that we can read further. But I'm just thinking that, yeah, this is something we should definitely talk about. This is something that came about on our first seminar when we were talking about listening, how it's not as straightforward as you would think to create this representation of a chemical organization theory and make it into an art piece. And it shouldn't be about that, in my view.
Yeah, I think these are just like superficial misunderstandings. Um, that's my feeling. Like, I think at the core, like, we are in the same frequency, but we come from different backgrounds and places, so it's kind of hard to really like be sure that the other is.
Yeah, we
So,
speak different
like,
language.
I kind of trust the fact that we are all here in that sense. Um, but yeah, so I'm not sure if anybody wants to open a thread of conversation, or we might leave it up to here. It's up, it's up to me personally. Felix, was amazing, your talk and the after talk as well. Really, really profound, deep. Thank you, really, thank you. And if anybody wants to continue, open another thing, you know? Yeah. Okay. Francis?
Well, I think it might still be useful to go back a little bit to the COT. What COT is, it provides a very simple, of course, highly formalized model of an autopoietic system.
Extremely symbolic.
Yeah, but, well, no, because the symbolic is you have letters there, A plus B gives C plus D, and what A and B are, you don't know, you don't specify. You can say, yes, the A stands for this particular molecule, but you don't have to. So in that sense, it's kind of an abstract language.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the language of mathematics. It's like 1, 2, 3. It's symbolic, yeah, but what is one? Is it one cat, or is it one garden, or is it one euro? In that sense, it's very flexible. You can fill it in the meaning the way you want. But what I wanted to
but
get
the point
back
is that the units that you reflect, sorry, Francis, the point is that the units you reflect will be those of kind of symbolic representation.
No.
So that's the point. That's the
No,
point.
that doesn't need to be. That doesn't need to be. That doesn't need to be. I mean, I can make, and that was the whole idea of the musical interpretation, is if you interpret these abstractly as sounds, and you even leave some freedom for the sounds to self-organize, what's the meaning? What's the symbol? You say A plus B gives C plus D, it produces some sounds. So the sounds are there, but what's the meaning? What does the sound stand for? It doesn't stand for an object. It doesn't stand for a person. So that for me is the essence of art science, to find a language that does not have a predefined meaning. The symbolic language we use a word and it has a meaning, it has a dictionary definition. You use some description in COT, A plus B gives C plus D. You don't know what the A plus B stands for. It can stand for anything. It can stand for a color. It can stand for a sound. It can stand for an object. It can stand for a chemical. It doesn't matter. But the interesting thing is, if you combine a number of these abstract descriptions, you see that it self-organizes. You see that it develops an organization. And that means that our brain will start to find meanings in there that weren't there at the beginning. That's the fascinating part of it. It's not a description of the world. We're not going to say, now we are going to make a COT model of the world, and this stands for this thing, and this stands for that thing. No, we are looking at how reaction systems in the most general, in the most abstract way, self-organize and generate their own meaning. And that's the autopoiesis. Once it's an autopoietic system, it generates its own meaning. And then the second part of our project, and that's the most important part, that's the part of the resilience or the goal-directedness, that is, what happens if now you perturb that system? Because now the system, it has discovered its own meaning, it's doing what it wants, it's autopoietic, but you push something onto it that is not part of it. So now the system needs to interpret what comes in from the outside. So now it needs to generate a meaning for something coming from the outside. And that's why you have the basis of cognition. And that is, I think, the essence of the theory of Maturana and Varela, is that you start with a closed autopoietic system. The only thing it cares about is to produce itself. But then that system is being perturbed by the outside world, and it needs to generate some meaning for those perturbations. It needs to know, if I get this kind of perturbation, then I should be doing that thing. And that's where the meaning further develops. And we can study that in this abstract way by generating random organizations and then translating them in any medium, sound, color, whatever, and use our perceptual system to maybe feel it in a more intuitive way than if we write it down with mathematics.
You please, Katarina, yeah, please.
So we cannot confidently say that this is a chemical organization theory. We can confidently say that this is a symbolic reaction organization theory. In a sense, this is what I'm trying to wrap my head around. I find it quite problematic. It's actually quite cool. This is why it's easy to translate it, I suppose. To me, the problem is, how do you define A and B? Exactly what you said. So if in a chemical organization theory you decide that that's an atom or a molecule or a specific liquid or that liquid or a compound, whatever, it's actually not describing the system, because you are imposing a symbolical structure for understanding the system. So the description of the system doesn't come from itself, in a sense. This is why I say we can't be confident to say that this is a chemical organization. To me, it's this is exactly the problem of how we were trying to think about this sound piece, is like what constitutes the inside of this sound installation and what is the outside. So exactly like, how do you define what is this A and what is this B and their interaction? So just the very act of us saying that that's an A and B, that's all we're talking about. This is just a symbolic organization theory. It's a symbolic organization theory.
Okay. I agree.
No.
But the symbol, yeah.
The fact that it's called chemical, the fact that it's called chemical, that's purely historical. That's because it started with the inspiration came from chemistry, but you can apply to anything. I mean, the A and the B's can stand for thoughts, can stand for emotions, can stand for groups, can stand for people, can stand for anything you want. So
even money.
It's a language. It's a language, but a flexible language. Of course, like all formal languages, it's limited. It doesn't. It will lack all kind of things. But it's a language that, compared to the other languages of mathematics, is much more fluid because it has this inbuilt self-organization, this inbuilt process in it. All the other languages of science, processes are an afterthought. You start by describing the objects and their properties and their states, and only then you're going to say, yes, but now I'm going to change this property into this other property. While here, the process, the reactions, it's the first thing you start with. And what the things are that are being processed, the A's and B's, you don't care about only in a later stage. That's not the important thing. And that's why we can apply it, for example, to generate music or to generate paintings or to generate theater.
But the ontology of what the species will constitute cannot escape from the fact that the species will mean something we represent symbolically. That's like, can it be the species something like a, so how can we connect, how can we build from, like that's the point, that ultimately we objectize the fundamental entities. We can choose whatever we want. We can choose whatever we want. But that thing we want
we don't
to choose,
we don't need to choose anything. That's the whole point of our simulations. We just generate random organizations and we see how they self-organize.
Yeah.
We don't care what the A and the B stand for.
I know. I think it's a hardcore conversation. So we have the scientific reality, the physical reality. We have the structural reality, which is what COT can model, structural reality. But we also have something that is beyond the structural reality. That's kind of like where that I think that it's not, maybe structural modeling implicitly assumes all reality is structural. There might be something that goes beyond this, what we can be expressed by reactions and A plus B, you know, so something, because you are
will be
like
things
this
that,
this A, yeah, but sorry to finish, this A thing and this B thing, you must assume that these things have that particular structure of being A.
No,
it doesn't matter.
Being A is not a property.
So when you say A, it's a property of whatever you want it to label as A.
No. That's an idea I had in a paper a very long time ago. I called it the bootstrapping axiom. The bootstrapping axiom is that if you have things that are defined in a relation, they get their meaning from the things they are connected with, but the things they are connected with themselves get the meaning from what they are connected with. So they give each other meaning. So the ABCs, once you start writing the reaction, the A is defined by the fact that if you combine it with B, it gives you C. So the meaning only emerges when you put the reactions in, the A's and the B's. Initially, they could be anything. Absolutely.
Is that the case in chemical reaction theory, or
no?
Is that the
in
case
chemical
there?
reaction theory, that's not the case. So we are making an
there
abstraction
you have
of
objects.
chemical reactions. Yeah. In chemical reaction theory, there are objects, there are actual molecules that have actual structures. That's not what we're speaking about. We're speaking about an abstraction. It's the same
Francis,
kind of
I think there's something problematic when we talk about sound, that we would make a distinction between the process or the dynamics and the objects. Because in essence, when you have sound, it's like it's just a process. And I think it's really interesting to investigate this, but a little bit difficult for me to see this in that chemical reaction theory.
Yeah, because you are not used to thinking in these abstract terms. But the whole point of chemical organization is that it is intrinsically process. It is all process. the
there are
A's and the
molecules.
B's don't stay there. They are not objects. They're just things being transformed into other things, and they don't stay there. It's just process. It's all process.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we might have to discuss this a little further, not today, because but I have some caveats on your reasoning. Some caveats. We might discuss them later.
I think,
because
Thomas,
I think
you
there is
still
a
have a
fundamental
little
objectuality behind.
I think Thomas, you and Dirk in Claire are still too much on the realist side. You believe that there is an objective reality outside us there, and we are trying to capture it somehow in symbols. But if you look more from the Maturana constructivist point of view, the reality is something we construct from the way we interact with whatever it is. But the whatever it is, it's not there. It's not objectively there. It's only there insofar that we interact with it. If we don't interact with it, yeah, it's as if it doesn't exist. It's the interaction that counts.
Well, yeah.
And the interaction you need
yeah.
processes for, and that's why you need a process type of language.
Well, we can leave it there. It's okay, but we will have to discuss further because it's the doom of language. We cannot just go straight and say, okay, this is what you think, this is what I think, and we need to use language. But we are in a great disagreement, a misunderstanding, I would say, because to be called too realist is maybe something that deserves further discussion to clarify. What is the layer of realism we are each of us?
I think Dirk is a Platonist even, but
yeah. No, it's hard because you have to define yourself. Well, I'm a structuralist, realist, or something, and it's very useful. So we haven't done that to which extent we are at which layer of real, like the maybe map. I'm this realist, this anti-realist, or something. But well, too long. Any thread that I could open would last an hour. So if anybody wants to say something.
I'm thinking that it would be really useful for the researcher in chemical organization theory to actually apply it to a large set of different, systems. So you could, think in music, but I'm also thinking could also work, in from anything from warfare to marketing.
Yeah, it has been done.
Right.
It has been done in many areas: decision making, politics, economics, ecology. This is like the basic areas where it has been already applied. And there is a later paper in sustainability. This, I think, a couple of months ago, someone published something around this, defining or proposing to define sustainability as environmental sustainability, let's say.
I think the
autopoietic
system is the chemical organization theory.
Yeah, it's a language for expressing that, but but when you when you are really ambitious and try to penetrate art with this, I think some monsters came along and say, well, not that easy, and bro.
They take us as it's food.
Yeah.
But then I didn't get that.
Yeah, the monster is taking us as its food at the moment.
Me, not Francis.
No, I mean, that's always the fear of people in the humanities, like those nasty scientists are going to eat us, they're going to take us, they're going to reduce us with all their models and their mathematics and so, and that's a complete misunderstanding. It's as if somebody who speaks English will say, yeah, but with his English he's going to take away all our poetry and we're not going to make any music anymore because it will all have to be expressed in English. it's a language. A language is not destroying anything. You use it for something that it's good for, and it's not good for other things. Yeah. You can't describe a symphony in English, so you use a different language for that.
Oh, but I think it's really interesting, Francis. Even
come on, guys.
The using of a model, really interesting. I'm not. It was just a joke. I think it's a really interesting discussion, really, about the process.
Yeah, no,
like
for me
nature.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. It's very deep.
I am
Felix,
really like on the verge of entering like art science mismatch and mismatch, but because they're
I have a question. Is this? I have a question. Is this? How is this conversation following conversation? Sorry, chemical organization theory.
I couldn't get the question. Sorry.
How is this conversation between us as I don't know, people, whatever? Like maybe that's not, they're not the A's, the B's and C's in the chemical organization theory, but like you can apply chemical organization theory to wars and hopefully music and all these economics and all these other domains. How is it applying? How is it present right now in this conversation?
Well, that's what Malta is trying to find out, because Malta would like to develop some kind of a way to describe communicative interaction in the style of Luhmann, and that write that down with chemical organization-like formulas. And also Christian, when he gave his talk where he was speaking about narrative, that's still very, very primitive. It's still very rudimentary, but you can do that in principle. But yeah, we have merely scratched the surface there.
Because it's like this conversation is you know, to a large extent self-organizing, kind of autopoietic, like it kind of keeps itself going. There's ideas which are emergent, which are not, you know, which are what was the word you used before, Francis? Sorry, the
Autopoietic, emergent,
self-organizing. The Gestalt. So there's also this meaning which are kind of the Gestalt. So and I don't want to get confused with the symbols again, with like we're using language, but still there's patterns which are emerge in the conversation, right? Which then take on their own form, which then start to you know, exert influence on us, interact with other patterns and stuff like that. So it's
we're not there yet.
It's fascinating that we're trying to understand what a chemical organization. Go on.
We're not there yet to describe it in COT, but I think in principle it's possible. But it would be quite a good exercise to do it, and that's what Malta will try to do. But yeah, Malta has experience with the social science aspects of coding language expressions, but the mathematics is not her strong point. So it's always a question of getting from the one language to the other language.
Because for me, it's really fascinating that we're trying to sort of and definitely and agree on like kind of what this chemical organization theory is and means and how it, but the idea that the very conversation that we're having is this thing, is exhibiting all these things. That we're kind of like there's this example that's just kind of staring us in the face, quite literally.
That, yeah. And then what would be the model of that? This is something that I wonder. Like if we not, yeah, but not
we would
really
be
sure if everything. Yeah, of course, we are the embodiment of the model, but then how to put it on a piece of paper? Sometimes I doubt that's possible. But maybe we can. I really propose that we finish the meeting here. It's like very late for you actually. I shouldn't be the one saying this, but we can. Felix, thank you. Sorry, and thank you for this really cool discussion after session, and
No, I think it's fascinating.
it's beautiful
very
too.
Interesting.
It's yeah. We are. I think we. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm sure we are achieving our goal. You know, because this is this level of depth and like exchange of of very kind of hard things to reflect on. I mean, this is very valuable. So
Yeah,
I
it has to
think
do
we had
with
a great.
Christian, the hidden patterns, the hidden values we access.
Yeah.
From where we start, it's like, are you, for example, do you believe in an outside world where you interact with, or the other world that doesn't exist at all, or has a meaning, or what is it, or whatever? Yeah, I think we're grasping the ground a little bit, we're scratching it. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So, well, with this, we thank all. Felix, thank you for your talk and making this happen. So we will meet in 2 weeks with, I think, Vincenzo talk. I think it's the next one in line, if I'm not mistaken, or Stan. Sorry, Stan, I'm not sure
No,
if you are
it's
next or Vincenzo. I could
Vincenzo.
check on the.
Vincenzo.
Oh, on.
Yes.
It's him. Yeah. Okay. So
And
we will, but in 2 weeks we have, and Katarina, please share, or Francis or Felix, whoever wants to share extra material for us to check. Whoever wants to share something that was resonant to this, you can send it to me, and I will share it to the Google groups. And also, if you want to invite other people, sorry.
if everybody is already a member of the group, we can just start a thread, an email thread, where everyone can send in their resources.
Yes,
So
Karsten.
let's centralize
I'm
it.
not sure if Karsten is in the group. That's the only person I'm not entirely sure it's in the group. So Karsten, would you mind that we check that now?
Here's the link.
So, or maybe to make it easier, can you send me an email? Just a hello email after the talk, so I get your email and I check, I add you to the Google groups. And if you want to add anybody in the group, there is a link for subscriptions. I put it on the YouTube channel. If someone is looking at this in the universe outside, can go to that Google form, subscribe, and will receive all updates. So, and if you want to invite anybody, just or let me know, or send that Google form. Like, I will share it anyways there.
Okay,
so
perfect.
With this, we thank once again Centro Leo Apostel for making this possible, and the Templeton Project for funding these activities. With this, we can say goodbye and see you in 2 weeks.
Enjoy
Thank
the
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.